Autumn may become the point of final degradation of the Russian army, and at that moment everything will depend on our readiness. This was stated on air by Yevgeny Diky, a veteran of the Russian-Ukrainian war, former company commander in the Aidar battalion and director of the National Antarctic Scientific Center, on Radio NV. He noted that according to Western media reports, which rely on their insiders in the Kremlin, Russian President Vladimir Putin is allegedly deeply convinced that if he is not forced to sign the freeze on the current line now, then by autumn his army will bring him the Kherson region and the Zaporizhzhya region, and possibly also Sumy, Kharkov and Dnepropetrovsk. That is, he seems to really believe in it. And judging by the way they behave, by the delegation they sent, with what proposals, it really looks like that. That is, it looks like Vladimir Vladimirovich has not come any closer to the front-line realities. He really can believe that his army will squeeze these regions for him by autumn. In real life, the situation is completely different. The veteran emphasized. The real situation, he added, is that the state of this, unfortunately, still numerically strong, 600,000 strong army is such that over the last year they have taken only Velika Novosyolki. This is a settlement with a pre-war population of 5,000 people. At the same time, the occupiers' losses in a year are greater than in any other year of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine. Thus, noted Diky, the Russian invaders can really continue to put maximum pressure like this until autumn. They will be given orders to break through. However, there will be no sense in this. As a result, by autumn, the quantity of their losses will finally turn into quality. It is already turning into quality. This army, unfortunately, still remains scary and powerful only due to its numbers. But at the same time, its quality is far from being as combat-ready as it was even 6 months ago, not to mention 2 years ago, he noted. The veteran emphasized that in this way, by autumn, the Russian army will completely lose its combat capability, and what will happen next will depend on the state in which we arrive at that point. Here is the point of the final degradation of the Russian army. It is somewhere plus or minus autumn. But there is the question, at that moment, will we also be able to only stand on the defensive and simply hold them back? And when they finally run out of steam and degrade, we will exhale and say, well, you see, you will definitely not be able to advance further now. You already see this. Well, let's negotiate. At the same time, he added, if at the moment when this turning point within the Russian army occurs in the fall, we prepare our army, in particular, equalize the quantitative ratio with the enemy army, then when in the fall they finally run out of steam and degrade, then we can talk about us changing places, changing roles, and finally again, as was the case in the fall of 22, moving on to offensive actions.
Ukrainian aviation has intercepted and struck military facilities where armored combat vehicles and personnel of the occupying Russian army were stationed. One of the facilities was a hangar where military equipment was stored. Ukrainian reconnaissance, who discovered the location of armored personnel carriers and Kamaz military trucks, reported the presence of the equipment in the area and transmitted information to the aviation forces. As a result of 4 strikes with US-made GBU-39 aerial bombs, the hangar and the military equipment located there, as well as Russian servicemen gathered in the area, were destroyed. In addition, 2 strikes with GBU-62 aerial bombs were launched on a building where soldiers of the occupying Russian army were gathered in the occupied city of Soledar in Donetsk region. As a result, the building exploded and collapsed, and the servicemen inside were killed. It should be noted that the number of strikes by Ukrainian aviation on military facilities with Western-made aerial bombs, both in the occupied territories and in the border regions of Russia, has increased. Poland is preparing for possible war with Russia and has been boosting its defense capabilities since Moscow's war of invasion in Ukraine in 2022, War Infographics Telegram channel has reported. Overall, the NATO member Poland has ordered more than 8,000 missiles, 2,000 units of artillery, thousands of other equipment and weapons, since early 2022. Anticipating possible Russian invasion, Poland tripled its defense budget since 2022. Moreover, this year Warsaw will spend nearly 5% of its gross domestic product on defense, more than any other NATO member, including the United States. Sharing borders with both Russia and Kremlin's ally Belarus, Poland has been building its defenses there. In addition, Poland has been training its male citizens for the war. In 2025, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced in the parliament that by the end of the year, every adult male in the country must be trained in the event of the war. Moreover, Poland recently announced it was withdrawing from the Ottawa Convention, a 1997 international treaty banning the use of land mines. Poland is not the only country fearing a Russian invasion. Earlier, Bild newspaper reported, citing unnamed European special services, that if the war in Ukraine ends on Kremlin's terms, Russia might send 800,000 troops to the borders of NATO, primarily to Finland, Norway, Poland, and the Baltic countries. Russia is already increasing its military presence in neighboring Finland that joined the NATO in April 2023. Satellite images show that hundreds of new military tents have appeared in the military unit in Kamenka, Leningrad region near Finland, and helicopters have been parked near a base near Murmansk.
Russia is building up forces near the border with Finland, creating new Arctic tensions amid the war in Ukraine, the New York Times reports. New satellite imagery confirms that Russia is actively bolstering its military presence near the Finnish border, with the construction of new tents, fighter jet shelters, and warehouses potentially signaling the Kremlin's long-term strategy in response to Finland joining NATO. Tents, shelters for fighter jets and warehouses for military equipment indicate a growing Russian presence near one of NATO's newest members. The publication writes, NATO confirms that Russia's activities resemble preparations for the deployment of significant forces in the event of the end of the war in Ukraine. Russian troops are strengthening bases and building military infrastructure near the Finnish border, which could reveal their strategy for what happens after the war in Ukraine. Finnish officials believe they have about 5 years before Russia increases its military presence to threatening levels. We will be talking about a much higher troop level, said Brigadier General Pekka Turunen, Director of Finnish Defense Intelligence. Military aircraft, dozens of new tents, new equipment and active construction. All this has been recorded near key bases near the Finnish border, in particular in Kamenka and Alakurti. Similar activity has also been noted near Estonia. They are expanding their brigades to divisions, which means the number of units near our borders will increase significantly by thousands, said Emil Kastehelmi, an analyst at Blackbird Group. Analysts believe that Russia perceives the Arctic zone as one of the key elements of its great power identity. Russia believes that the Arctic and access to the Arctic is key to its greater power status, a senior NATO official said. Finland, which joined NATO just 2 years ago, does not yet see a direct threat, but the country's government is closely monitoring the situation. The increase in military force in our neighboring areas will take place after the fighting in Ukraine has subsided. This is what we must be prepared for, said Jan Kusela, Director of Defense Policy at the Finnish Ministry of Defense. Let us recall that earlier, the German Federal Intelligence Service came to the conclusion that Russia perceives relations with the West as a systematic conflict and is preparing for a major war with NATO. It was noted that the Kremlin is ready to use force to achieve its goals and by the end of the decade may be fully prepared for a large-scale conventional war. According to the Lithuanian intelligence service VSD, Moscow is not yet in a position to attack the entire alliance but can test NATO by conducting a limited military operation against one or more member countries.